Welcome to Hildestone College's quick lesson series where our teachers give you some English language tips.
Hello and welcome back to Quick Lessons. Today we're looking at the contrast words but, although, however, even though, despite and in spite of. Now although they all introduce contrast, they are used in different ways. And that's what we're going to look at. So I have two independent sentences here for you. The climate is changing. People aren't changing their habits. Now, of course, since the climate is changing, people should change their habits. And that's the contrast that we want to show. The first one is very easy. We're going to use the word but. You have a go, stop the video if you need to, then I'll show you my sentence. So here's the sentence with but. The climate is changing, but people aren't changing their habits. I'm sure you got that one right. Let's go on now with another relatively easy word to use, however. So here's my sentence with however. The climate is changing, however, people aren't changing their habits. Now look closely. This is still two sentences. I've started the second sentence with however, comma, because that's how it's used to introduce contrast, okay? It starts a sentence. Now we're going to look at some of the slightly more complex words to use. So we'll try first using although. Have a go and then I'll show you my sentence. Let's check. Although the climate is changing, people aren't changing their habits. Did you get that right? Did you put although at the beginning? I hope you did. See if you can do the same thing now with even though. Here's my example with even though. Even though the climate is changing, people aren't changing their habits. Now that's okay for speaking and most kinds of writing. If your writing is very formal, however, I would recommend that you use although here because even though is a little less formal, but it will depend on the overall formality level of your writing. Okay, let's go on then. Our next transformation will be using despite, and there are two ways of doing this. Have a go yourselves, then I'll show you my sentence. So here's the first example. Despite climate change, people aren't changing their habits. Did you notice? Did you get it right? There's a big grammatical change when we use despite. Despite is followed by a noun, not by a verb, and that's why I had to make it despite climate change. Our next example will be similar, still using despite. See if you can write another slightly different sentence with despite. So here's my sentence. Despite the changing climate, people aren't changing their habits. You see, I'm still using a noun, but I'm using changing as an adjective here. Okay, but it's still a noun phrase, and that's what has to follow despite. Next, we'll look at the phrase in spite of, which has the same meaning as all the rest. It's very similar, in fact, to despite, but as you can see, it's a three-word phrase. Okay, you have a go at changing the two sample sentences into one, and then we'll compare. So this is my example. In spite of climate change, people aren't changing their habits. You see, it's just like despite. I hope you got it right here. Now, again, see if you can come up with a second sentence using in spite of. Did you remember to change it in the right way? In spite of the changing climate, people aren't changing their habits. Well done if you got that right. Now, there is a way to use the verb phrase in these sentences with despite and in spite of. I think it makes the sentences very wordy and a bit overlong, but it may be useful to understand them. So let's look at despite first. You can say, all right, despite the fact that the climate is changing, people aren't changing their habits. And of course, it's the same with in spite of. In spite of the fact that the climate is changing, people aren't changing their habits. Now with this sentence, because it's relatively short anyway, I guess it is acceptable to do that, but often it will just be too wordy and make your sentence hard to read. So I would be very careful using despite the fact that or in spite of the fact that. But as I said, you may hear it or see it, so it's useful to understand it. Okay, so I look forward to seeing some of your sentences with contrast in and with contrasts accurately shown with the words that we've looked at today. Good luck, keep practicing, and I'll see you again soon for another quick lesson. Bye!
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please click on the like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and click the bell icon so that you don't miss the next video. That's it for this lesson. Until next time, goodbye.